My mother faked her death and filmed my wife cheating from inside her own coffin. The funeral wasn't for her. It was for the man I used to be. What came next? Even I didn't see it coming. If I told you my mother faked her death to expose my wife's betrayal, you'd think I was lying. But I saw the footage with my own eyes, recorded from inside the coffin she was supposed to be buried in. No one cried at the funeral. Not for her, anyway. They were too busy laughing at me behind their sunglasses, whispering things I was never supposed to hear. That was the day I died, too. Not in body, just in the version they had created for me. And the man who rose from those ashes, he wasn't coming back to be forgiven. He came back to be remembered. The envelope was thicker than usual. No return address. Just a gold embossed seal on the flap, and my name printed too neatly across the front. For Ellis. Not Mr. Ellis. Not Dad. Not love you. Just Ellis. Like I was a client. Or a placeholder. Inside was a formal invitation printed on textured cardstock. Black ink. Cream paper. The kind that tried to feel important. It read, "You were cordially invited to a private family tribute evening in honor of Walter Ellis. Hosted by Clarine Vance and family." I read it 3 times before flipping it over. No time listed. Just a location, the Fair Hollow estate, and a dress code. Dark formal. I hadn't been to Fair Hollow in years. It was my father's oldest friend's property, now owned by my wife's cousin. He'd always liked the sound of wealth more than wealth itself. I should have known. Clarine hadn't spoken to me directly since the funeral. That day, she'd worn black lace and crocodile tears, whispering to guests like she was the grieving widow instead of me. She never really liked my father, but she loved the power of being seen mourning him. This invitation wasn't grief. It was a show. I laid the card flat on my desk, staring at the seal. A part of me wanted to ignore it. Throw it out. Let them gather and whisper without me, as they had for years. But another part of me knew. If I didn't go, they'd say I was weak. That I couldn't face the family. That I'd disappeared again. So I shaved. Polished my shoes. Put on the charcoal suit I hadn't worn since the divorce hearing. And I drove. The estate gates opened slowly, like jaws parting. Soft jazz played through speakers hidden in hedges. White-gloved staff took coats and handed out champagne before I even crossed the threshold. Inside, the lighting was warm, too soft, like a dream someone paid extra for. People turned when I entered, not with welcome, but with recognition. There he is. He came. I wasn't late. I wasn't early. But the room shifted when I arrived. Like it always did. Clarine floated toward me in a sleek black gown, her smile all porcelain and tension. She kissed the air beside my cheek. "You made it," she said, like she hadn't sent the card. "It said family," I replied. Her smile twitched. "Of course," she said. "We all wanted you here." "We." I looked past her. My cousin, Aaron, stood near the front row. Polished. Relaxed. Too relaxed. He nodded at me, one hand in his pocket, the other wrapped loosely around a glass of bourbon. Clarine followed my gaze. "He helped organize everything," she said quickly. "Been such a rock for all of us." I nodded slowly. Of course he had. A voice called for everyone to take their seats. The tribute would begin shortly. I moved toward the back. Not a guest. Not a host. Just present. I sat. And waited. Because deep down, something told me. Whatever this night was, it wasn't a tribute. It was a message. The lights dimmed. A hush settled over the room. Not reverent. Expectant. Like everyone knew something I didn't. The screen came to life with a slow fade of black and white photos. My father as a boy, in uniform, holding my daughter when she was a toddler. Familiar images. I exhaled. Maybe, just maybe, I was wrong. Soft piano music played. A few rows ahead, Clarine dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Theatrical, precise. She knew exactly how much grief would look appropriate. Then the screen flickered. A brief static buzz. The music skipped. And everything changed. The next image wasn't of my father. It was the back of a leather chair, his chair. The one in his study. The camera angle was low, slightly tilted. Like it was never meant to be seen. 2 people entered the frame. At first, I didn't move. The room didn't either. But then, her voice. Playful. Familiar. It was Clarine. Laughing. Aaron followed. Smiling. Relaxed. Too relaxed. He sat in my father's chair. She sat on his lap. The audience didn't gasp, not at first. It was too surreal. Too abrupt. But when Clarine, the way she touched his face, soft, confident, made someone gasp mid-sip. A woman in the front row whispered, "Is this The music stopped altogether. On screen, Clarine looked directly into the camera, not realizing it was there. Or maybe not caring. Aaron whispered something. She laughed again. The room fractured. A few people looked away. Others stared at me. Clarine hadn't turned around. Neither had Aaron. Because they didn't need to. They already knew. The footage stopped abruptly. The screen went dark. No one moved. No one breathed. And then, my daughter stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She just said, calmly, clearly, "Now you all know." Then she sat down. The silence was unbearable. Not just awkward, crushing. I stood. Clarine turned. Her face pale, jaw tight, lips parted like she wanted to explain. I said nothing. Aaron didn't even look at me. Just stared at the screen like maybe it hadn't happened. I adjusted my cuff, straightened my jacket, and walked out. No words. No scene. Just the echo of my shoes on marble and a storm gathering behind my ribs. They thought the video was the moment. But they were wrong. The real moment was me leaving, and not one of them trying to stop me. The front door of the estate closed behind me with a soft click. No one followed. No hurried footsteps. No calls of my name. No explanations, no apologies. Just silence. I stood under the porch light, listening to the wind rustle through the hedges and the faint music still playing inside. They'd resumed the party, I realized. As if nothing happened. As if I hadn't happened. I looked down at the gravel path, clean and decorative, like everything else they curated. It didn't feel like I was leaving anything behind. It felt like I'd finally stepped out of something I never truly belonged to. I got in the car. Drove without music. Without a destination. I didn't text anyone. Not even my daughter. Not yet. For the next week, I didn't check messages. Didn't answer calls. I didn't need to. The silence was doing all the talking for me. Clarine tried once. A voicemail. Stiff, brittle. "You really should call me back. People are starting to talk." I deleted it. Aaron never reached out. He didn't have to. Men like him only speak when they win. When they don't, they vanish. And my daughter? She didn't say anything either. But I saw it quietly. She unfollowed her mother's social media. Deleted every photo that had Aaron in it. Left the family group chat without a word. It was the loudest thing anyone had done since the video. One morning, a letter slid under my apartment door. No return address. Just a single sentence written in handwriting I knew by heart. I didn't want to protect them anymore. No name. No apology. But I didn't need either. I folded the letter, tucked it into my wallet. Not because I forgave her, but because I understood her choice. At night, I'd sit on the balcony with a mug of tea, watching the lights of the city flicker like nervous thoughts. And I kept thinking one thing. They had always talked about me like I wasn't in the room. Maybe they believed I couldn't hear. Or maybe they didn't care if I did. Because to them, I was never really there. Just the husband. Just the provider. Just the background. I was the man who made the chairs steady, who paid for the dinners, who drove everyone home. But I was never the man who was seen. No? They couldn't stop seeing me. Because I wasn't reacting. I wasn't shouting. I wasn't playing the role. I had disappeared, but not as a victim. I had left the stage. And without me, their show made no sense. They tried to spin it, of course. Clarine gave an interview to one of those lifestyle blogs that only publish compliments and curated kitchen photos. She said the video was leaked. Called it a targeted attack on a grieving family. She used words like violation, trauma, and sabotage. She never used my name. Aaron stayed invisible. No statements. No comments. Just a few grainy photos of him on vacation with friends, the kind that always stood just out of frame. But things started to slip. Sponsorship deals began to disappear. Quietly. A few brands removed their logos from Clarine's social media pages. A charity she fronted paused her appearances. One board member resigned due to personal conflict. They didn't say what the conflict was, but everyone knew. Because once people start whispering, it's hard to make them stop. And the whispers? They weren't about what happened in the video. They were about when. The date stamp was visible for just a few seconds. It was recorded the day after my father's death. They couldn't even wait 24 hours. I didn't speak. I didn't post. I didn't leak anything. I didn't have to. People filled the silence themselves. Even my own family. My brother called once. Left a message. "Look, I don't know what's going on, but if you ever want to talk, I'm here." He never was before. But the silence had made him curious. Nervous. Clarine's mother emailed a one-line apology. No subject line. No greeting. Just, none of us thought it would go that far. I didn't respond. That was the point. They had spent years treating me like furniture. Comfortable, necessary, silent. Now that I was truly silent, they realized what they'd lost. Not my voice. My utility. I sat at a coffee shop one morning. Watched Clarine's name scroll across the muted TV screen. Something about an ongoing investigation into misuse of memorial funds. I sipped my drink. No rush. No smile. The barista asked if I wanted the usual. Sure, I said. Name. I paused, then said, call me Ellis. She wrote it without question. And that was when I knew. The name wasn't theirs anymore. It was mine. The papers were filed before sunrise. No press releases. No court drama. No shouting matches over speakerphone. Just a courier with an ID badge clipped to his coat, a sealed envelope, and a timestamp that landed like a quiet gavel. 5:43 a.m. The legal team I hired didn't ask for attention. They didn't wear expensive suits or drive luxury cars. They worked from small offices with locked filing cabinets and double-verified encryption. They were paid well, but not for speed. For silence. And now, without so much as a headline, Clarine was no longer in control of the family trust. Not stolen. Not seized. Just reversed. I hadn't touched a loophole. I hadn't manipulated the law. All I did was follow it more carefully than she ever thought I could. There was a clause, paragraph 12, subsection F, in the original trust charter my father had drafted 21 years ago. It stated that upon his death, if no majority consensus among bloodline heirs existed, executive oversight would revert to the senior-most surviving Ellis. She'd never even seen it. Aaron hadn't read it either. They assumed they were the only ones with the paperwork, the only ones who mattered. But they forgot who filed it. Me. At 8:02 a.m., a document landed in Aaron's inbox. Termination of shared interest. The subject line was clinical. The body text, 6 lines long. There were no threats, no justifications. Just facts. He wasn't needed anymore. And his access, financial, legal, digital, was revoked. All signed. All sealed. All done. That afternoon, I parked across the street from his office building. I didn't go inside. A man in a navy suit did. He carried a plain leather folder with my initials in the bottom corner. I watched him enter the revolving glass doors and disappear into the mirrored lobby. 12 minutes later, he exited. Still silent. Still sharp. By then, Aaron had seen the notification. I imagined his face, eyes scanning the lines, disbelief bleeding into panic. The kind of panic you can't hide, even when no one's watching. Clarine called that evening. Twice. Then again. And again. No voicemail. Just her name lighting up the screen, followed by silence. I set the phone down, face down on the table. I didn't need to say anything. The silence said it all. By 9 a.m. the next morning, her cousin summoned an emergency board meeting. 3 members didn't show. One sent in a formal resignation letter with no explanation. The renovation grants they'd padded? Flagged for audit. The charity gala that Aaron pitched as a strategic visibility effort. Suspended. And the fund they built, the one I was never allowed to touch, began to hemorrhage from the inside. Not from a scandal. From precision. From my pen. But I didn't show up to that meeting. I wasn't on any call. I didn't sign into any Zoom link. I didn't have to. They knew I was moving. They just didn't know where the next step would land. And that uncertainty, that silence, it did more damage than noise ever could. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, a legal pad open, a pen in my hand. At the top, I wrote one phrase. Block letters. No flair. Didn't I tell you? It had started as something I whispered under my breath. Now, it was becoming something else. A signature. A sentence they'd remember longer than anything I ever yelled. 3 days passed before she knocked on my door. Not called. Not texted. Just knocked. I opened it, and there she was, Lena, my daughter. The only person whose silence I didn't resent. She wore a gray hoodie and jeans. No makeup. Her hair pulled back in a loose knot like she hadn't slept. We stood there for a beat, neither of us speaking. Then she said quietly, "It's all true, isn't it?" I stepped aside. Let her in. She sat on the couch like it was foreign. Like she didn't know whether to make herself comfortable or apologize for ever being comfortable somewhere else. I brought her tea. She didn't drink it. She just stared at her hands. They said you left because you couldn't handle Mom's grief. That you. She stopped herself. That you broke things. I sat across from her. I did, I said, but not in the way they told you. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small flash drive. This was in Aaron's desk, unlabeled. I don't think he knew I found it. She handed it to me. I didn't ask what was on it. I already knew. She kept talking. I used to think you just disappeared, that you stopped fighting, that you gave up on us. I didn't, I said. I stopped playing their game. Her eyes welled up, but she didn't cry. She looked like she was waking up inside her own body. I want to leave, she said finally. All of it. The house. The company. The family dinners where we pretend it's not all broken. I didn't nod, didn't smile, just listened. Because she wasn't asking permission. She was deciding. Later that night, she sent out a public statement from her own account. Just a few sentences. I was raised to believe silence was politeness. That truth makes people uncomfortable. I don't believe that anymore. My father never stopped showing up. I just stopped seeing it. I'm correcting that now. The post went viral in less than 2 hours. Clarine never responded. Aaron deleted his Instagram entirely. And the board? They requested a private meeting with me the following morning. But I didn't go. I was already out walking with Lena through the park. No bodyguards. No suits. Just two people finally talking. And for the first time in years, she said something that made my chest ache. You don't have to say anything, Dad. I know now. I see it. I looked at her. Didn't I tell you? The message came in at 7:12 a.m. No greeting. No signature. Just one line from an unknown number. If you do this, you'll destroy everything. I stared at it, not because it shocked me, but because it confirmed everything I already knew. They were starting to feel fear. Not fear of me as a person. Fear of what came next when the man they used to laugh at finally stopped playing along. I didn't respond. I just deleted the message. Everything they claimed I would ruin wasn't mine to protect anymore. They had already burned it themselves. All I was doing was standing still while the flames caught up to them. The board meeting went forward without me. But Lena went. Alone. She walked in dressed in a dark navy suit, her mother's old pearls glinting against her collar, not as tribute, but as irony. Her hair was pulled back, her steps calm, every movement calculated and centered. She didn't flinch when the room turned quiet. She didn't glance at Clarine when their eyes met. And when she sat down at the head of the table, she didn't wait to be asked. She opened the folder, cleared her throat, and began to read. Not with fire. Not with accusation. Just clarity. The trust discrepancies. The misuse of memorial funds. The date-stamped video files. The shell companies. The quiet withdrawals. The fraudulent authorizations. One by one, she laid them down like playing cards. And with each word, you could feel the chill settle across the room. She didn't speak louder than necessary. She didn't rush. Because silence wasn't absence, it was tension stretched to its limit. And Clarine? She said nothing. Her mask of composure, always flawless, was cracking. I wasn't there, but Lena told me later how her hand trembled under the table. How she kept glancing to her left, waiting for Aaron to walk in and save her. He never did. He sent a lawyer's note instead. One line. I am formally withdrawing from involvement in Ellis trust-related matters, effective immediately. The same words I'd used years ago when I walked out of their house without raising my voice. Outside the building, a reporter waited with a camera and a cautious question. Miss Ellis, is there anything you want to say? She looked directly at him. You don't lose family. You lose illusions. This wasn't betrayal. This was a performance. And the curtain just fell. Later that night, she came by my apartment. No formal talk. Just 2 cups of tea, a cracked open window, and the echo of a world that used to belong to other people. We didn't say much at first. Then she asked, do you think she'll ever apologize? I thought for a moment, then shook my head. No, I said, but that doesn't matter. We walked past the old estate just before midnight. The lights were on. Clarine was visible in the window, pacing, yelling at someone over the phone. Probably no one. Probably everyone. She hadn't left, but everything else had. Control. Status. Her audience. Gone. Lena stopped at the gate and turned to me. Do you regret not screaming? I smiled slightly. No, I said, because the only thing louder than screaming is being impossible to ignore. And we walked away. Not because we won, but because we didn't need to anymore. The next morning, the news finally broke. Not a leak. Not a scandal. A filing. Public. Unavoidable. The new trust oversight was formalized. Control shifted. Voting power reassigned. The family name stripped from the final line of the document like it had never belonged there at all. Clarine's silence spoke volumes. She didn't issue a statement. Didn't call. Not to me. Not to Lena. Instead, she disappeared into the guest house of her own estate, a place she once used to host award recipients and influencers. Now, she barely left it. The house, technically still hers, stood like a gutted museum of better lies. The furniture remained, but the illusion of relevance had burned out quietly in the night. 3 days later, Lena called. You should come to the gala. I raised an eyebrow, even over the phone. Why? Because they already know you're coming, she said. And the silence won't be as sharp if you're not there to hold it. So I went. Not for them. For her. She was standing outside when I arrived, dressed in a deep emerald green, her hair pulled back, her hands steady. The cameras flashed, but she didn't blink. Inside, I felt the eyes. The whispers. Some remembered the fountain. Some had watched the video. Others had only heard fragments. But all of them had questions they couldn't ask out loud. The room shimmered with tension. There were no confrontations. Just stares held too long. Just pauses that stretched one beat too far. Clarine didn't show. Aaron sent a junior rep from a firm no one respected. The old cousin stuck close to the wall, avoiding direct lines of sight. Lena stepped up to the podium mid-evening. No long speech. Just a toast. To the ones who taught us how to lie. And to those who chose to stop lying. She raised her glass. I raised mine. No applause followed. Just a thin ripple of clinking glassware, unsure whether to join or retreat. And I like that. Because it meant the message landed exactly where it needed to. In the silence. Later, someone approached me near the coat check. A woman from a foundation Clarine used to fund. She leaned in and whispered. I always wondered why you never spoke out. I looked at her. Because I wanted them to wonder. We left early. No fanfare. No goodbye. Just Lena beside me, her heels echoing against marble as we crossed the lobby. Outside, the air was sharp. Clean. Like something had been scrubbed from the sky. She exhaled and looked up. Do you think they'll rebuild? I thought for a moment. Maybe, I said. But not with us in it. And that was the point. They could repaint the rooms, change the locks, rename the company. But they couldn't rewrite what happened in silence. They couldn't erase the night the curtain dropped, and the cast walked off stage without clapping. The estate was listed 2 weeks later. Not through a family statement. Not on a luxury site. A foreclosure notice. Buried halfway down a real estate wire, wedged between suburban developments and auction block sales. Former residents of the Ellis family. Not Clarine's home. Not Aaron's legacy. Just a line item on someone else's spreadsheet now. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. I just drove past the gates one morning, slow and unannounced. The hedges were overgrown. The iron fencing had started to rust. A broken light fixture dangled above the mailbox, swinging in the wind like it was waiting for someone who would never come back. A security sign staked in the yard read, "Protected." But no one had protected me when I lived behind those walls. The truth was, it had never been my home. Not really. Inside, I imagined the rooms, the pristine kitchen that always looked staged, the marble hallway that echoed too loud when no one answered, the upstairs study where they'd held meetings I wasn't invited to, but pretended I had declined. Every inch of it had been designed to exclude without ever saying so out loud. You're not unwelcome. Just unnecessary. I parked half a block away and walked. Not toward the front door. Just along the edge. Past the old garden path where Lena used to ride her bike. Past the side gate that never opened for me but always opened for everyone else. Past the balcony where Clarine once toasted to the people who made this possible and didn't mention me. Not once. I stood at the outer edge of the fountain. Not the one I was pushed into. That was miles behind me now. This one was older. Unkept. The water was still. Leaf-covered. The light hit it just right, though. You could see the reflection of the house twisted and its surface distorted, fractured. A perfect mirror of what they built. And what they lost. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Lena. Want to meet for breakfast tomorrow? I replied, yes. Same spot. She didn't need a name. She knew the place. The quiet cafe tucked away in a corner of the city where no one knew our story and no one pretended to. As I walked back to the car, I passed a realtor's sign hammered crooked into the ground. Open house next Saturday. I smiled at the irony. An open house, finally. After years of locked doors, private meetings, and closed ranks, the doors were wide open. To strangers. To everyone. But not to us. Because we didn't need to go back in. We were never waiting for keys. We were learning how to build a new home, not in bricks or papers, but in truth, and in the space left behind when the noise finally stopped. The next morning, I arrived first. Same cafe, same corner booth, same low hum of clinking mugs and soft jazz humming beneath the conversations of strangers. I didn't check my phone. I didn't scroll. I just sat, still, calm, because after everything, after the funeral, the video, the unraveling, I had no need to rush anything. When Lena walked in, she didn't wave. She just slid into the booth, removed her coat, and offered a small, tired smile. "You look lighter," she said. I didn't answer with words. I just nodded. She ordered black coffee. I had tea. No ceremony. No tension. Just two people letting the silence speak where it needed to. "They're still texting me," she said eventually. "Clarine, mostly. Aaron once." "What do they want?" "Relevance." I looked at her, surprised. She shrugged. "They don't want forgiveness. They want a version of the story where they're still the main characters." That made me laugh, just once, a short exhale through the nose. "That sounds about right." There was a pause, a deeper one. She traced the edge of her mug. "You know what I realized?" "What?" "No one ever said it. Not once. Not out loud. That they didn't think you belonged. That they didn't see you. But you could feel it. In the way they didn't ask. The way they filled every room like your silence was decoration." I looked out the window, watched a young couple walk by, hand in hand mid-laugh. "You start to think it's normal," I said quietly, "to be erased politely." She leaned in a little, voice lower. "Do you think you became invisible, or that they just trained you not to ask why?" That hit somewhere I hadn't looked in a long time. The kind of question that doesn't come from observation, but from shared experience. The table between us held more than mugs and napkins. It held years of things we hadn't said. And now, we were unspooling them, thread by thread. "The funny thing is," she said, "when it all fell apart, when I saw the tape, read the filings, felt the silence stretch, none of them said, 'We were wrong.' Not even once." "That's because they weren't trying to be right," I said. "They were trying to be loud enough that no one asked questions." She nodded. "But you didn't get loud." "No." "Why not?" I looked at her. "Because noise fades. Silence echoes." We finished our drinks in quiet agreement. Before she left, she stood by the booth for a second, uncertain, then said, "You never asked me to choose between them and you." "Not once." "That was the point," I replied. "It had to be your decision." She nodded slowly. "That's why it matters." Outside, she walked away toward the city, shoulders squared, spine straight. And I sat there, watching her go, not with pride, but with peace. Because some conversations aren't meant for the people who hurt you. They're meant for the ones who saw it, lived in the middle of it, and chose to open their eyes. It came by accident. A voicemail not meant for me. It landed in my inbox through a forwarding glitch. An old shared family line no one remembered was still active. I almost deleted it. Almost. But I pressed play. Clarine's voice. Tight. Rushed. Caught between desperation and control. "He thinks he's clean. Let him. The minute he steps out of line, we'll say he blackmailed us into silence. Just give it time. Lena will cool off. She always does." Silence. Then Aaron's voice. "What if she doesn't?" A pause. Clarine again. "Then we remind her who built everything she stands on." And that was it. A simple conversation, dry, quiet, meant to be forgotten. But I saved it. Not because I needed proof, but because it confirmed what I had already learned. Silence is powerful. But not everyone understands what it costs. I didn't send the voicemail to Lena. I played it once, then twice, then let it sit on my drive like a sealed envelope. A line I wouldn't cross unless I had to. She deserved her peace. But I deserve my memory. That week, headlines shifted. The world moved on. New scandals. New distractions. But the damage they had tried to contain had already finished its quiet work. Their invitations slowed. The whispers behind their backs sharpened. And the family that once ruled by charm and proximity was now something different. Forgettable. I got a call from the firm they used to work with. The same ones that once dropped me without warning after Clarine's spin campaign made me look like an unstable liability. Now, they wanted to have a conversation. I declined. I didn't need a seat at their table anymore. Because I was building my own. One morning, Lena forwarded me a news article. It was short. Barely a paragraph. Prominent Ellis family property fails to sell at auction. Withdrawn for reassessment. No buyer. No interest. Just a reminder that legacy doesn't sell when it's hollow. Later that day, she came by. We didn't talk about the article. She just handed me an old envelope. Yellowed. Soft at the corners. I found this in Mom's drawer. It's addressed to you. I think it's before everything. I opened it after she left. Inside, a single handwritten note. Clarine's handwriting. Just 6 words. You were never supposed to matter. No date. No context. But I understood. It wasn't anger. It was design. I set the letter down, poured a cup of tea, and sat quietly on the porch as the sun dipped behind the trees. Because sometimes silence is a scar, and sometimes it's armor. That night, the porch light flickered. It hadn't done that in years. I used to think it was faulty wiring, some old connection in the wall struggling to hold on. But lately, it felt more symbolic, like the house itself was remembering. I sat outside with the letter in my lap, the porch light blinking every few minutes like a slow heartbeat. I hadn't told Lena about the message. Not the voicemail. Not the note. Some truths do not protect the people you love. They only burden them. And I was done giving weight to people who treated me like scaffolding. I had stood long enough. There was a box I kept in the back closet, buried behind old jackets and a pair of shoes I never wore again after the funeral. Inside, a photograph. Not one of us all smiling at a holiday. Not one of me holding Lena as a baby. Nothing staged. It was an old, unfiltered snapshot captured when Clarine didn't know I was in the room. She stood laughing, mid-gesture, champagne in hand. Aaron at her side. And me, far in the corner. Half-cropped. Half-lit. Holding a plate. Looking somewhere else. Invisible. It wasn't just a picture. It was a thesis. I placed the photo on the porch railing. Stared at it until the details blurred. Then I struck a match. Held it steady until the flame kissed the edge. It burned slow. Quiet. Not a fury, just a release. When the flame reached my blurred image, it curled the paper into a small ghost of ash and memory. I swept the ashes into a small glass jar and sealed it. Not for display. Not for ceremony. Just to remind myself, even ghosts can leave remains. Later that week, I got an email from one of the last remaining Ellis cousins. Short. Clumsy. Hey, didn't know everything. Hope you're good. No name. No real apology. I didn't respond. Because I was tired of being someone's second draft. Lena came by on Sunday. She brought cinnamon rolls in silence. We didn't talk about the letter. She hadn't asked. She wouldn't. She knew when silence wasn't distance, but preservation. She noticed the jar on the windowsill. Didn't ask. Just nodded once, as if to say, I see it. I understand. We ate on the floor of the living room, like we used to before everything was broken and expensive and strained. When she left, she turned to me at the door. You know, she said, I think you matter more now than they ever allowed themselves to realize. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't agree, but because some truths are better held than said. And when the door closed behind her, I sat in the stillness. The porch light flickered again, and this time I let it. Because broken things don't need to be replaced. Sometimes, they're just reminding you they're still alive. The invitation came folded in gold. Handwritten. Pretentious. Just like everything they used to do. It read, Family dinner. A chance to reconnect. No judgment. Just closure. Signed at the bottom, Clarine. No phone number. No address. Just a time, a date, and the name of a restaurant they used to frequent when they were still pretending to be noble. I didn't reply. Didn't cancel. Didn't accept. But on the night it was scheduled, I went for a walk. Nowhere specific. Just away. Somewhere around dusk, I passed by the restaurant window. And there they were. Clarine. Aaron. 2 others I barely recognized anymore, cousins or spouses who had chosen convenience over conscience. They were all seated at a long table, heads bowed toward empty plates, not speaking. The kind of silence that wasn't peace. It was discomfort. An awkward performance. Like actors unsure what scene they were in because the director had finally walked out. There was no laughter. No clinking of glasses. Just forks idle on napkins, waiting for a moment that wouldn't come. Clarine glanced toward the window once. I'm not sure if she saw me. I didn't duck. I didn't wave. I just stood for a moment, watching a dinner that was never really meant to include me, now sitting like a hollow echo of reconciliation. They didn't want truth. They wanted a reset. A way to soften their public image without doing the work. But I wasn't there to be their narrative. Not anymore. I walked on, past the florist where Clarine used to demand white orchids every Sunday morning. Past the bookstore that refused to host Lena's nonprofit event after Clarine made a call, past all the places where decisions had once been made behind my back, and where I had learned to stay silent to keep the peace. Now, I walked past them like museum exhibits. Beautiful, cold, irrelevant. I ended up at Lena's. She opened the door without a word and gestured toward the couch. I didn't need to explain why I was there. She just brought over 2 mugs of tea and sat beside me, our elbows touching but our eyes elsewhere. "Did you go?" she asked finally. I shook my head. I saw them, and they looked like people trying to remember how to fill a room. She nodded. That's how I felt growing up in that house. We both went quiet, the kind of quiet that feels earned. After a while, she pulled out a folder. "These are the final documents. The last bit of transfer paperwork. It's done." She set them on the table between us. I didn't reach for them. Not yet. Instead, I looked at her. "You sure you want this?" "Yes," she said, because it was never really theirs. We signed them together. No fanfare. No champagne. Just 2 pens and 2 steady hands. And when it was done, Lena smiled. Not wide, but true. "That dinner they had tonight," she said. "Yeah. They'll probably talk about it like it meant something. Like it was the first step toward healing. And it wasn't." "No," she said. "It was just noise." The phone rang at 2:14 a.m. I knew who it was before I even looked at the screen. Clarine. No text. No warning. Just the name. Flashing. Waiting. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Not because I needed time, but because she did. "Hello." My voice was level. Low. There was a pause. Then, "You saw us at the restaurant." Not a question. A confirmation. As if she had practiced this opening line for hours, over a glass of something expensive she didn't pay for. I saw a group of people pretending not to miss me. Another pause. "You didn't come in." "No." "Why not?" "Because that dinner wasn't for me. It was for the version of me you thought still needed to be invited." The line went quiet again. I could hear her breathing, measured, shaky. "You always took things too personally," she said finally. I closed my eyes. Let that sit. Let it stain the air between us. I took things silently. I corrected. "You just confused the lack of screaming with forgiveness." She didn't argue. That surprised me. Instead, her voice softened. "Lena won't speak to me. Aaron won't answer my calls. The board has cut me out. And I just wanted to ask if you'd say something to help." I blinked. Slow. Measured. "Help who?" "All of us," she said, and I could almost hear the tears she wasn't letting fall. Maybe we went too far. Maybe we got lost in protecting the family. I felt the edge of something sharp press against my chest. Not anger, not pain. Clarity. "You weren't protecting the family, Clarine," I said, calm as glass. "You were protecting the lie." Silence. Longer this time. Then, quietly, "Do you still think about it? The funeral?" "All of it." I exhaled through my nose. "Only when I realize how far I've come from it." She tried again. "I was angry. You left. You didn't fight." "I didn't play," I said. "That's different." The line held. Then, her voice dipped lower than I'd ever heard it. I wanted to be right. And there it was. Not guilt. Not regret. Just the crumbling ego of someone who built a house out of gaslight and glass. I didn't offer comfort. Didn't offer rage. I just offered truth. "You were never meant to win." Because it wasn't a game. She didn't reply. I heard her inhale once, sharp. A swallow. Then the click of the line going dead. No goodbye. No apology. Just absence. Perfect. I set the phone down. Not with relief. Not with pain. Just with understanding. Because the final word didn't belong to her. It never had. I woke just before sunrise. The house was still. No phone calls. No headlines. No noise. I made a pot of coffee, black and bitter, and stepped out onto the porch. The same porch I had once stood on years ago, waiting for a family that never truly saw me. Now, there was no waiting. Just being. The porch light, the one that used to flicker at random, now stayed steady. It had been repaired weeks ago, but I hadn't bothered to notice until that morning. Funny. When something stops begging for attention, you finally see it for what it is. Reliable. Unassuming. Exactly like me. Lena arrived just before 8. She didn't knock. She just walked out onto the porch with 2 mugs and handed me one. "They listed the house again," she said. "The estate." She nodded. "Dropped the price by almost half." I didn't ask who was selling. It didn't matter. Clarine had vanished from the public eye. Aaron was back to selling influence in smaller, sadder circles. The cousins? Scattered. Quiet. trying to reinvent themselves as if the internet had amnesia. But truth doesn't forget, and it doesn't forgive politely. Lena pulled a folded photo from her coat pocket. Not a printed one. A Polaroid. Fresh. Still developing. It was a shot of the old estate gate, half open, paint peeling, a single sign swinging crooked. For sale. As is. She set it beside me on the railing. Thought you'd want the last word. I looked at the image. Didn't smile. Didn't laugh. Just stared. Because it wasn't revenge. It was reflection. And the photo said everything without needing to scream. We sat there in silence, sipping coffee. The kind of silence that holds space instead of tension. Then she asked, gently, "Do you regret not saying more?" I thought about it. Thought about the funeral. The fountain. The dinner I never entered. The phone call I didn't return. And I said, no. Because I had said everything without speaking. And they heard it. When she left, I stayed out on the porch. The sun was higher now. The light touched everything, the railing, the grass, the empty chair beside me. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out one last thing. A small, worn note. You were never supposed to matter. Clarine's handwriting. I read it again, then folded it carefully, and placed it beneath the leg of the chair, let it rest uneven, wobble a little. Because lies don't hold weight unless we sit on them. I rose, walked to the door, and turned once. The porch light stayed steady. The gate remained closed. The photo stayed curled on the railing. A final scene with no applause. Just facts. Just silence. Just me. Exactly where I was meant to be.